Actually, can I hang up and I'll call you back on my computer? So that'll be better audio.
Oh, I just started streaming. Okay, call me back.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
We are starting the debate now. There is technical issue on Glover's end. We are going to sort that out, and he will be back. Okay, we're just waiting for Glover to get back so we can have this discussion. Oh, there he is. Okay, you here?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to watch watch what I'm talking about. We're going to talk about various issues surrounding China, the importance of them in whatever, all that jazz. Okay, so just as a preface to this discussion, we basically agree on like 80-90%.
I'd say most of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like specifics and terminology, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so it's not like gonna be like an argument or something. So this
Oh
is
no.
my sidekick Maxwell Glover,
Hello.
and we're gonna have a discussion on China. Well, we might as well take questions from the audience if they come up
Yeah.
too.
I don't have
Okay.
the YouTube video pulled up, but I can do that, so I can see the chat if you want.
No, I can see it. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Yeah.
I can just read out the questions. No big deal.
Okay.
Okay. First of all, we're gonna start on some things that we agree with. The entire Hong Kong separatist movement was complete nonsense. That was completely, and I'm certain that there are people in Hong Kong who want to separate. Do they speak for the majority? Absolutely not. And I'm sure they got their funding from the United States and other Western countries. I don't think that there's any significant desire to separate from the rest of China. I think that that's complete BS. That was completely astroturf movements. Like, not really all that different than when you had like the Gusanos, the children of the landlords in Miami, and the U.S. gives them money and weapons and says, "Oh, look, Cubans are like rising up." It's the same kind of nonsense. I assume you would agree.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's a holdover from colonialism in many ways that some of the bourgeoisie and other people, a lot of white people too, want it to be either independent or even return to British rule. So, but I think one of the problems though is that China enables a lot of this with the idea of one country, two systems, because like they basically make a safe haven for the bourgeoisie, not only not even to speak of in the mainland, but also there to have their interests more recognized. So I think that is one of the flaws if we're going to talk about that too. That
I would
some
I
of
would
the,
I would definitely agree because they are basically setting it up to be. Um, they're setting that divide up
mm-hmm.
by doing that one country, two systems. Um, so yeah, I would agree with that. But I mean, I get why they did it.
Yeah, yeah,
They wanted to basically keep all the international banks that were there
mm-hmm.
and keep all the capital that was in the country. Because I actually do remember when Hong Kong went back to China, and I
Mm-hmm.
do remember some of the media coverage. It was like, oh, there's gonna be like mass killings of people who believe in capitalism in Hong Kong, and there's gonna be the place is gonna be a prison state. And then I was like, oh man, this is bad. And then I watched an episode of The Late Show with David Letterman, and
Mm-hmm.
Jackie Chan was on it, and he said,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh yeah, I was there for the handing over ceremony. It was like, oh my god, it was like 4 hours. I almost fell asleep. I was so tired." I'm like, wait, I thought this was like going to be like a prison thing, and he was just there falling asleep because it was so boring. Oh, okay. I guess that's really not how that was.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't even a military. It was literally a handover, not a military takeover. And I've obviously wasn't around then, but I've heard so much of this stuff too. Like, oh, they were gonna confiscate all their property, and oh, you better go to Hong Kong and claim your stocks and go shopping for one last time before it all ends. It's like, no, that didn't happen.
Based of true.
Exactly, but sadly not. And like you said, I see why they get it there because there was a lot of profit to be made and stuff that could go towards benefiting the country as a whole. But to keep it in that kind of gray area of autonomous, but not only autonomous, but with a separate political system, kind of makes it kind of a gray area that's easily exploited. So, but yeah,
Oh yeah. Okay. So yeah, we're on the same page with that. Um. Excuse me. Uh. Only guy cut back on the cigars. Fuck. Somebody asked, "Are you a dingist?"
me, okay, that's one of those things that I hear a lot, like Dangist and all that. I take an issue with it, not because like I'm offended or anything, or like, but I don't really know if Dangism is a real current in thought. Like to me, Dangism is just revisionist Marxism in China. Like that's literally all it is. But like, I guess Dangism in a way is like people in the West or people who are not in China trying to copy China's model or thinking that everything Deng and the reformists did was correct. So in that sense, no.
Okay. So, okay. So you definitely delineate between you and say, like the mopping crowd.
Oh yeah, yeah. And
So
even then, like, yeah, go on.
yeah. So okay. Yeah. Sorry to cut you off.
I was just saying, like, even then, like the interests that they're putting forward are not even like in line with what so-called Chinese socialism is today. Even so, I mean, even that's a departure from quote unquote Dangism, right? But in that, so no, I'm not a Dangist, and I'd be critical of things, people calling themselves Dangists or stuff like that, because the reason that Maoism is a thing is because it moved beyond China and it had applications beyond that national situation. The Deng Xiaoping theory, which I guess you could call it, hasn't. It's pretty much a Chinese phenomenon, and there have been um, things that emulate it, right? Like you have the reforms in Vietnam, market reforms and stuff. But I don't know. I think Dengism is something that is Chinese Deng Xiaoping thought, better called, and then Dengism would just be kind of revisionist, right-leaning Marxists in other countries who are like, oh, this is Chinese socialism, quote unquote socialism with Chinese characteristics, blah blah blah. That's the way, and kind of thing. So yeah.
I would also add that originally Prachanda in Nepal was
Mm-hmm.
aiming at that same kind of Dengist reform too, and then that caused a bit of an upheaval, and now Nepal is like a black hole for information. I don't like nobody knows anything about what's going on there.
Yeah, I've honestly, I think it's the Chinese and the Americans trying to grapple for control and interest there, but I really like it was parliamentary for one, but it was Maoists in holding a lot of seats, if I'm correct. But then the main leader of the Maoists stopped becoming a Maoist, and it wasn't even like Deng's policy of one party kind of thing. It was like a multi-party parliamentarian thing. So I really don't know that
Yeah,
much about what's going on.
that's what was really strange about it. There was like 15 Maoist parties.
Yeah. which is honestly kind of sad. Like, you want more unity if you're gonna go build a united front. That revolution was a long time in the making, but yeah, I
You
don't
know,
know.
unity, struggle, unity, split, struggle, split.
Literally. Oh man.
That sounds like more like a. It was. That sounds more like a. That's what it was. Struggle, split. Struggle, split, struggle.
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay. I guess I should have planned this out better. What? Do you have any other like thing?
Um, things that we agree on, first of all.
Okay, let's screw the things we agree on. Let's do let's do the stuff we don't agree on.
Okay. So, like I said, we agree that China is revisionist, obviously, and an imperialist power. I actually have like a quick story, if you don't mind. It's just kind of about
Yeah, go
Chinese
ahead.
imperialism firsthand and secondhand. So, I went to Laos in 2019, and this was right before the pan. It was in August, and I worked in a meat cutting plant for a while to save up money. Anyways, I went to go there, and there was like this riverboat thing that I was on with like a family, and they basically live on the boat and they fish and stuff. And anyways, we were going down the Mekong River, and they pointed out, oh, here's like the new railroad that China's helping build, and it was huge. It was cutting across the jungle, and it was they're saying in like a few years we'll have better trade, better travel and stuff. And they seemed really grateful for that. And I asked about the conditions, and they said they didn't have any conditions. There wasn't. They had to pay it back eventually, which is flawed. But um, there was no conditions other than that, and there wasn't any like collateral or anything. Anyways, so the people that I talked to at least were very grateful for that. Kept going down the river, and there was this farm, and I said, "Oh, is that bananas?" And they say, "Yeah, that's bananas." And they say, "But this is a banana farm that's owned by someone who's Chinese, and unlike in Laos, they don't have to follow the pretty strict regulations and protocols that a state-owned company in Laos would. So they use a lot of pesticides and stuff. So the bananas grow bigger, but they don't really look the same. Like you see a Laotian banana, it's like a fingerling, like it's really small. But the Chinese ones are more like what we have here. Anyways, so there's lots of people getting sick and dying from chemicals that they're inhaling, poor working conditions, long hours. So basically, what I'm trying to say is China commits imperialism around the world in various forms, and that's just one example. You can talk about Africa, you can talk about um, Latin America, or in other parts of Asia, but not all of what is deemed, in my opinion, deemed to be imperialism is necessarily imperialism. But there's two factors. There's the help. This is what the one that I was having a problem with is Chinese companies operating with the consent of the Chinese government overseas, doing shitty work practices, exploiting the local people, that kind of thing. So that's a problem. But then another thing is that people often say, "Oh, China's helping build infrastructure and stuff," and yeah, well, it's kind of shitty that they're putting people into debt. The kind of the debt that they're accumulating is a lot, excuse me, a lot less. And that's not to say it's not as important as what the U.S. is doing, right? Or it's not as bad. But they're actually investing more money than they're making. So they've invested over $10 billion in the global south, and that's with their funded projects. And not all of them are good because it makes certain states rely too heavily on this Chinese infrastructure and support. But on the other, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say was I can't remember the name. Sri Lanka or Indonesia, where like they built a shipping port, and it was like the main shipping port of the country, and they had to move X amount through there a day. If they didn't, then it would default to Chinese ownership, and it's like
Yeah, and
A
eventually,
foreign country owning your like shipping industry,
yeah,
that's pretty sus, man.
eventually, I think it was Sri Lanka, and if it was Sri Lanka, it became a naval base eventually, and then eventually it was either split up between Chinese and Sri Lankan, or it was just given back. Because I know that the naval base in Sri Lanka that they had isn't operational, as far as I know anymore. But yeah, that was the thing. But yeah, so some of what they do overseas is helping, like building schools and roads. Like I think that's a positive thing. But when they're going in, like we know the stories about the mining companies in um, Africa, or the like I said, the banana plantation in Laos where they're not following rules. So I think a lot of what gets called imperialism by China is imperialism, but yet also a lot of it is aid that they're doing in good faith, but at the same time, it's not 100% here. I mean, the Soviet Union did a lot of the same stuff, but a lot of their aid was given away, right? So they would give tanks, planes, infrastructure to various countries.
The
And
I believe the Soviet Union actually purchased Cuban sugar at 10 times the market price.
mhm. And in a way to help build up their economy so that they could get out of the blockade. But in some ways, China is helping countries who are victims of imperialism, like Iran and stuff like that, build up their infrastructure. But at the same time, they are in other ways, not always the same ways sometimes, but in other ways they're also asserting their own imperialist control and breaking into these places to secure profit. If that makes
Yeah, like in Nigeria,
sense.
they're building a bunch of rail transports, and
Mhm.
the basically it's the Chinese state that's paying for it
Mhm.
because basically if you left it to the free market it wasn't going to get done. I mean that's really no different than why the state built the interstate highway system in the U.S. and why it built the railroads.
Mhm.
Same thing in Canada, etc. Because it's the money is not there for a private company to do it. But what's
Especially in
interesting
a third. Yeah.
is that you've got like a 1.5 billion dollar railway in Nigeria that's being built, but they gave the
Mhm.
contract to a Chinese company.
Mhm.
So it's
See,
like,
that's
yeah,
the thing.
1.5 billion dollars to their own,
Workers going back to them.
yeah, and
Yeah.
their own company.
Mhm.
So, but kind of in a way, you just handed a bunch of money to a private company to do that. I mean, I'm assuming that they hired local people to do the job.
Mhm. But in the end, the profits and the stuff is going back to.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, the profits of it are going back to a Chinese company. They would have
Mhm.
been. It would be better if those profits went off to Nigerian
Mhm.
business,
Mhm.
because it's okay. China Civil Engineering Construction Corporation and the Olakola Deepwater Port Project, which was given to the China Ocean Shipping Group.
Mhm.
Oh, and that's going to handle a 27.5 kilometer Mariana Idodo Okokomakio Logos Light Rail Project. I hope I said that right. I probably didn't.
Something like that.
I mean, you get the same kind of things in when the IMF comes in. They say, okay, we're going to give money for infrastructure, and technically they do. Um, they do build the infrastructure more in all roads lead to Rome kind of thing, where it's like, okay, yeah, they build infrastructure like shipping and railways so that private companies can move in and strip the resources out. Because again, it's not in the favor of the free market to actually produce those because it's too expensive. So yeah, I mean, they got infrastructure, but the infrastructure was just used to plunder the country. And then you give it the exorbitant interest, then you turn around and you say, okay, well, I see you can't pay, so you get an IMF loan so long as you privatize all your shit
Hmm.
and just let us plunder the hell out of you. So, I mean, technically, yes, you are getting a better deal under China, but it's not. It's the deal they're getting, not the deal that they deserve.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I'd say it's similar to the IMF in its function and what it does, but a lot of the means are different. Like I know for one thing, China doesn't put like demands on countries if they want aid or they want development projects with them. They don't say, oh, you have to deregulate your healthcare. As far as I know, if I'm wrong, you can tell me. But they don't say, oh, you have to deregulate your markets and your healthcare sector. And I know there's been like trade agreements, like if they do something, you have to trade with them for so many years, blah blah blah. But from what I know, there's not political conditions as in IMF loans. And in terms of interest, there's usually not interest, but it usually is something you'll have to pay back eventually, right? So it's not free, but it's also not the exact same way that the IMF operates. But yeah, you're basically right.
Yeah, like some of the conditions I've seen Chinese companies give. I mean, the Chinese government give is that you have to lower the price of certain raw materials.
Mm,
Like, okay, yeah, we'll do this, but you got to pay us back this, and then you got to give us your iron at like a lower price,
mhm,
etc. I mean, China is out to make to make a profit. I
mhm,
mean, we bait. So I mean, they really wouldn't be doing that unless they did. I mean, they're laying down the groundwork for their own. Essentially, they're laying down the groundwork for their own empire, and
mhm,
especially now when they see, the U.S. is probably on the verge of losing its imperialist status probably within the next 10 years.
mhm,
So I mean, it's like a okay. Okay, here's a good way to put it. Thomas Sankara.
mhm,
When Thomas Sankara was talking about help for Burkina Faso, he said, "You want, send us the things that we need, not necessarily loans for things we need.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
don't send us food, send us tractors and
Stuff
millet and
produce our own food. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's more along they wanted, and that's why he was assassinated. And I mean, yeah, we know he was assassinated, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Because he demonstrated too much of a self independence,
Mhm. Mhm.
whereas a lot of the stuff with China could be a little bit too dependent. Like they write into contracts that they can seize stuff, and it's like,
Mhm.
that's not really independence.
Yeah.
But it's like a okay. I'll put it to you like this: you have an underdeveloped country, right?
Mhm.
You need infrastructure in order for it to run. You need a national railway system, a national highway system,
Mhm.
shipping ports, etc. The free market essentially can't do it. Just
Mhm.
about every country that has ever existed has always been a public works project.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, these underdeveloped African countries don't have the money to do it.
Mhm.
They don't have a private company can't do it, and the state often doesn't even necessarily have enough money to do it. So they do require a loan, and just about everything that's made today is done through a loan anyway.
Mhm.
Even the largest U.S. corporations borrow money all the time for rounds of production, etc.
Mhm.
So where are you going to get that money? Because you don't have it, and if you had it,
Mhm.
then you would have already built it up. Again, this also could go into why economic planning is a lot better, etc.
Mhm.
So they're going to have to go somewhere for money, and nobody's really being completely altruistic when loaning money to them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course.
So then it becomes a case of, rock in a hard place. You know, we either have this one that will take her house, or this one that'll break her legs if
Yeah.
we don't pay the loan. So that's it's a terrible situation. China could do so much better in this regard,
Hmm.
but they're choosing they're choosing not to.
Hmm.
Uh, no Red Terror Productions. The guy's not a dentist, and neither one of us are saying that China's socialist. Were you saying that?
Yeah, I would, but not like I could get into the whole definition of socialism and stuff, but if that's what you want to do now, but
Okay, let's do that. Um,
okay.
I would say that you could call it socialism if you had a particular definition of socialism.
Hmm.
I would say it's not Marxist socialism,
Okay.
because
Yeah, I would.
Marxist socialism specifically rejects private property. It specifically rejects market forces, etc. So you could say that it's another concept of socialism.
So basically, my point is that um, if you compare the reforms in China, which I mean, I'm not going to say I'm somebody who is in favor of these or somebody who supports these. I'm just saying what happened comparatively. So in the Eastern Bloc and the USSR, when they had when it collapsed and they became capitalist, there was a lot of things they had in common. First of all, they got rid of the Communist Party entirely. In some places, it's still like outlawed. Like you have in Poland, Ukraine, you can't even be a communist. They swept the Communist Party from power for one. Second of all, they would privatize most of the state assets and all of the publicly owned, or not all, but most of the publicly owned works. And often this was stuff that would eventually go into the hands of NATO or Russian oligarchs, right? So first of all, yeah, they got rid of the Communist Party and they privatized. China, for one, they didn't get rid of the Communist Party. Um, and if we're going by the rule of the requisite for socialism, and my main critique there is that they should have stayed with the 68 party constitution, 1968 party constitution, where they say only workers, peasants, intellectuals, and petty bourgeoisie can join the party, right? You can't have big capitalists joining the country, even if they still exist. Which changed. It didn't actually change under Deng. It was Jiang Zemin, I think, who changed that. But anyways, China's reforms, they did it. Most of the pre-existing businesses and state assets were not privatized. Rather, they started allowing people to um, to start their businesses and to operate on a market, and then those existing um, state companies and stuff like that were operating on a market mechanism. So basically, they kept the socialist base. They didn't do away with that, but they just added capitalism on top. And I'm not saying that because I know as a Marxist, you can't if you're being dialectic, you can't be one thing at the same time. One thing while you're also another thing. You can't be capitalist while also being socialist, right? It's one or the other. You can't be, oh, I'm both. Right? That's not a thing.
No, you're right.
But the base that they have is socialist. Yet the development after that became capitalist development, and that's why I'd say it's capitalist roading, not capitalist. But again, this is all stuff in terms of definition. But and one of the things that they did do, and it wasn't privatization, but they went back to co-ops and the family responsibility household system, I think it's called, where it wasn't like privately owned, but it was family managed under the state, but it wasn't communes anymore, and then also cooperatives on the side. So they took a step back in that regard, and lately, capital has been going out of control in China in some regards. Like you saw the Evergrande crash. There's a lot of other things that these contradictions are coming back to bite them in the ass, right? And I
Yeah.
don't think that the party's stupid. I think they know this,
Oh, of course not.
and they're trying to combat it, but also they are being opportunistic because they're not getting rid of it all right, all right, outright. They are allowing it, but kind of trying to moderate. So it's like social democratic. So it's like Lenin's NEP in a way, but they didn't do away with the base that they had that was still socially owned and operated, and they still do excuse me, plans, like they have 5-year plans. So it is a planned economy, but a lot of what it is runs off of market. And here's one of my things that I would say: I don't think that Marx was specifically anti-market, yet he was anti-private property, and that's where my main gripe comes down, because he talked about the anarchy of production and how excuse me, markets are unpredictable and they don't always serve the interests of the people of the state, and that can still be seen very clearly. I just don't think that markets are the be end all social. I don't think they should be something to be aimed for, but they can be a stopgap. I don't think it's you should make your goal to be market social, because then you're just doing Titoism or Dengism, right? You're not building something that's moving towards communism, right? But as a stopgap, I see it as acceptable. My main issue is private property, and also the expansion of private property that's taking place to such an extent. Like you have so many big Chinese companies that are operating there. What is it, Alibaba, and what's the other big one?
Um,
Tencent. There's a few, but that's just tech companies. But most of their heavy industry is still state, but I think they should nationalize those, right? But
yeah.
but yeah, I can't say that it's like socialism in the sense that the USSR was or anything like that. And I think it's definitely revisionist and deviating from what should be done. Yet I don't think it can be called capitalist either, because, and like I said, it can't be one and the same both the time. But their base is socialist, but they've allowed so much capitalist development to happen that it's their a lot of their economy now. Because I don't know the exact numbers. Like I think it's 70 state, 30 something is private, and that's not counting Hong Kong, of course.
Well, this is
But
this is this is where I would disagree. I Marx did specifically say to do away with markets. He said, I just pulled up the quote. Within the cooperative society based on common ownership of the means of production, he wrote, the producers do not exchange their products. And Frederick Engels even said, the seizure of the means of production by society puts an end to commodity production. And at that point, the market is to be replaced with a conscious organization on a planned basis.
is that from Utopian Scientific and the Communist Manifesto, or what's that from?
That is. Would be nice if they.
It's all good. I think the Engels one is from Socialism, Utopian Scientific, and the other one is, yeah. I don't think that's wrong either. It's moving from something from distribution instead of commodity production. But I don't think commodity production per se is capitalist. Like
He specifically says that.
yeah, no. But I'm saying in the Soviet Union, did you have commodity production under Stalin? I mean, you had commodity production, but it wasn't done on a market basis, right?
Yeah, it wasn't done on a profit motive basis either.
Yeah.
So, which I would argue that wasn't commodity production. Actually, who does have a good thing on this is Finbol. Finbol has a really good thing on socialist commodity production, where things were produced according to need, not according to profit.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like, yeah, I made this like stupid shit that's like gonna make your life whatever kind of crap.
Like what?
Hold on, I would like to respond to the Oriental despot, the idiot who was harassing me and kept claiming And kept You know what? I'll just say I'm gonna bother typing it. No, I told him like I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to have anything to do with you. Just stop contacting me. Then he kept messaging me, so I blocked him, and now here he is trying to get my attention again. Sorry, you're coming off as a creep there, Jay. Just go away. I don't want to hear your dingest fucking bullshit. Just get lost. I don't want to talk to you. I've already made that clear. This is not just harassment. This is like creepy stalker, and go fuck yourself.
Sorry, what were you saying?
Look, I've repeatedly told this guy I don't want to have anything to do with him. I don't want to have any contact with him. The stalker doesn't get it. Anyway.
You blocked him like that?
Yeah, I don't. I've already told him I don't want to talk to him. That's why I blocked him.
Okay. Sorry, go on.
Okay. So basically, there's a. Yeah, so it wasn't produced based on the ability to exchange. Like it wasn't made for produced for exchange. It was made for use value. Whereas a lot of what is in China is made for exchange value, particularly with the West.
Mm-hmm.
Because I usually like to make the joke that if China's a planned economy, where in the national investment budget is it for dragon dildos to sell to the West?
No, that's true, but I would say that there, like I said before, there is that well, not really new since the '80s, that market-based, privately owned sector that they have that doesn't operate. It's all market forces, and a lot of it. Another one of the troubling things is that it's for export, right? So a lot of it's for export, and even if it was to keep there, it wouldn't change the fact. But also that it's for export stuff to the West, a lot of it, right? So they have that. How would I like that? Development of capitalism that went and distributed things according to market, but they have that state that is working for distribution. Yet some, not all, strangely, but some of the SOEs also operate on the market. Like I know some of the big ones around the world. You got like Norinco and stuff like that, right? But domestically, they're planned and organized. I don't know if Norinco is, but I'm talking oil, gas, roads, agriculture, kind of things. But it should also be said that markets don't necessarily make capitalism, nor does central planning make socialism, right? Because you have forms of.
I would disagree. I mean, how do you have capitalism without markets?
No. I'm saying it's not exclusive to it.
No, okay, no, it's not exclusive to it. No, okay, yeah, you're right.
Like you have.
There were markets in feudalism.
Yeah, and you have central planning in elements of central planning in capitalism too, not just in.
Of course, it literally doesn't fucking work if you don't do it.
Exactly. Unlike what some fundamentalists would say, it doesn't work. So I like they're not mutually exclusive, but I see your point.
Yeah. So I would actually argue that China isn't planned. I would argue that there are national guidelines because they don't sit through and mathematically calculate all the stuff in the economy that's being produced. They're just saying, okay, we have a target for, A, B, C, D. And this is what we want to achieve. And sometimes they hand those off to private companies. Okay, we want this done, do it. Which is not the same thing as an economic plan. I would say that's more of a guideline. Because there's no formula being used to calculate the economy. Like I said, the Soviets used the Feldman Manubis model to calculate how the economy should be done. I mean, they had a whole huge, the GOS plan, the State Planning Bank did that, and one of their things was, when they started doing market reform, so they wouldn't have to calculate it, etc. Blah blah blah. So I would say it's more of a guideline. It's not exactly completely the anarchy of the market, because obviously, you have state-owned enterprises that I would say probably do function more as a more on use value than exchange value,
Mm-hmm.
because they are planning, okay, we want you guys to do this, so we're going to make sure that there's enough of X steel available for it,
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot. I mean, and then keep in mind, when they're exporting steel as well, they don't really know how much steel the rest of the world's going to be using. So,
Mm-hmm.
but again, that's also export. You can't. It's not really the same thing as domestic consumption.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, but you can do a lot, like for building roads and shit. That is very, very clearly planned out by the government, and then they go to the state-owned enterprises and dictate certain quotas and put that in national budgets. So in that capacity, you could say yes, it is economically planned.
Yeah, so it's planned, but it's not central planning. It's not central planning, like top down. There's planning involved. I don't know. This is just might be a little bit off topic. I don't know. Did the Maoist and like the Huagua Fang government before Deng, did they have did they use a certain calculation?
I'm
Like the Soviets, because I know about the Soviet one,
I
and
know
it was also in Eastern Europe, but it.
the Chinese one. I don't think they did that. Keep in mind, they never got through their kind of like NEE period.
Mm,
But so the mathematical model was more of a post
mm,
NEP thing, but China never finished the NEP, so they never really made it. In the revolutionary era, it was more like a here's here's a quota. This is what we need you to do.
mm-hmm.
Get this to us. Any surplus you can just keep and then sell at this particularly dictated price, so that they don't
Yeah.
go around ripping people off. Unfortunately, too many numbnuts exaggerated how much they had. Which, I mean, you can't even blame socialism for that. That's just human stupidity or human error.
Yeah. But people love to blame that on socialism, of course.
It's not the best way they could have done it, but it is the way they did it. I think that they were focusing too much more on democratizing the production process, which
Mhm.
I would say there was more of a democratization of the production process in revolutionary China than there was in the Soviet Union, but it wasn't necessarily the best thing to do. I mean, even dialectically, we understand that there's always going to be a dialectical relationship between what is necessary to achieve a goal and how we would like that goal to be achieved.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, the ideal way of doing things versus the very pragmatic way of having to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to have to be uh, concessions made on both parts. One of the good ways to put this is Che Guevara, when he was writing up the Cuban industrialization process, called the budgetary finance system, which was put together. He had a bunch of loose writings, and it was all put together by Carlos Tablada in '85, and he put it called Politics and Economics in the Transition to Socialism, and it was all on the writings of Che Guevara with regards to the budgetary finance system. He said, things that are economically rational are not necessarily socially rational, and some things that are socially rational are not necessarily economically rational.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's where there's strength in the Chinese reforms, but they went too far. They allowed too much concession for the capitalist class and for the market, while at the same time something had to be done post the collapse of the USSR, right? But I don't think that was the correct way to go. But it could also be argued that, in my opinion, Deng focused too much on economic growth and Mao focused too much on political struggle. But the thing is, the political struggle is needed while you are doing economic growth. Because if you don't have that, you fall into like what happened to the Warsaw Pact when they were trying to rebuild their economies, but it just the elements like the solidarity or whatever groups and oligarchs who seized the money came out on top. So there's a balance between being pragmatic and being, I wouldn't call it idealistic because that's not the right word, but adhering to theory and being goal oriented, right? But China went too far in that regard, where they gave up on principle too much. Well, it might have been good intentions to say we have to develop the economy more. They sacrificed principle to do so. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah, I think we can agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can definitely agree with that. There's, yeah, you're right. Idealist. I didn't mean idealist as in like.
Oh no. I know. I was just trying to find a better way to word it.
Yeah, the like the best way that you would want to do something would want something to work, but it doesn't really work that way, kind of thing.
Best case scenario, best case Ontario kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That Trailer Park Boys reference.
Oh boy. But yeah.
So I'd say we have, I guess, relatively minor disagreements on that, but nothing terribly substantial.
No, like we both agree that China's revisionist and they've gone down the capitalist road. Yet at the same time,
I mean,
not everything is easy, and they had a lot of it's complex.
Yeah. Because I'm not buying this whole socialist billionaires nonsense.
Yeah,
I'm really not.
That's the thing. Like, if you're true that you think that that socialism works and you want to build it, I don't think you should. One, it's billionaires, and on another, I could talk about this, but most of their assets they don't have direct control of. But anyways. But to advocate for that says that should be something to be aimed for, when it's not just a byproduct of reforms, like that's something you want to aim for, like that's just utter nonsense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for you to have a billionaire, somebody else has to be in poverty. Like, if there's a rich, there is a poor. Yeah, if there's a rich, there's a poor. I mean, okay, let's take the wealth that those billionaires have and redistribute it to the regular people in China and promote equality. I don't think that the socialist billionaires would be so happy with that.
Oh no. That's the thing. They're not socialist. They're not socialist billionaires.
Yeah, there's no such thing as socialist billionaires.
Yeah. And like that's the thing. The party is in cahoots with them a lot of the time, but the party is also there's contradictions between them. They have interests that go back and forth, so it's not like the party's always like, yes, we want billionaires. It's not like the party's trying to shut them down. They know that they're being opportunists. They know that there are sections of them that support them for the reforms, but there's sections of them that also oppose them for still having regulations and still having elements of planning. So when people say that they are socialist billionaires, they're not. Even if you believe China's socialist, they're in direct contradiction to the party a lot of the time. So it's like there's more than one interest being grappled with. And Mao talks about this, but the class struggle goes on after the basic victory of the revolution is achieved. And obviously, in China, there's been a lot of steps back. But people don't think that, as soon as the revolution happens, that the bourgeoisie will become socialist. That's not how that works at all, right?
No, but I would also say that, there's a lot of millionaires and billionaires in the party, and a lot of dingus like just outright deny
Oh yeah.
that it happens. But
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No.
Xi Jinping is a multimillionaire landlord. Like him and his family own like a ton of land. Like
Mhm.
a landlord is literally running the country. And yeah, Black M3W does bombard the headquarters. And what's the name? Leftism Today makes a very good point. China has a very big and sharply increasing Gini coefficient, and that
Mhm.
is, if my memory serves me,
Inequality, right?
yes.
Yeah. And this goes back to what I was saying before. Like, I don't think that that's the thing. If the party was stupid, they would they would ignore it, or they would say that it's good. In fact, if you read the thing is though, if you read a lot of uh, um, Chinese media, they will acknowledge it and they will say that it's a problem. The problem is they're not doing enough to combat it. There are some things they I could bring up the article right now, but they're talking about, and this isn't this was a state like media. This wasn't something that
Yeah. One of the
that
things.
they're saying redistribution needs to happen. So there are those voices, but it's just not coming to pass.
Yeah, I think it's more of a case of China. The party recognizes if inequality gets too big,
Hmm.
there's going to be a problem, because one of the things that China used to say in the early 2010s was, they say, well, what do you want? What are you shooting for here? And they would say, we aim for a harmonious society.
Hmm. Yeah, I remember that.
And I'm like, okay, the fuck does that mean?
That's so vague. It could mean anything, right?
I would assume that means very little social unrest, uh, enough money that people don't rebel. I mean, that's probably the best definition of harmonious that I could
I think it
see.
goes back to, this is another problem that I have with it, but embracing the old traditional Chinese culture too much, because I think that's a concept from Confucianism, if I'm not mistaken, the harmonious society thing. But yeah,
I guess it depends on how you define
and
harmonious.
now that they don't use that, but they do like to say rule of law, because they say that the harmonious society has been completed or something. I mean, if you're gonna use a vague definition, I guess it has. But yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And the putting efforts into producing green energy, I think they could do more.
Hmm.
But they do export oil, so uh,
Hmm.
it's one of those stupid things where if your stuff wasn't dependent on it, you could just change it.
Yeah, yeah,
But I will applaud them for putting emphasis on green energy, because that does need to be done, and it's very clearly demonstrating that the state has to do it, and that
yeah.
the free market is not going to do. I preaching at the choir here. I mean, we know the free market's not going to do that.
And that's another thing that they recognize. Like, a lot of people, if you don't read like Chinese media a lot like I do, you think it's like kind of one thing that's always towing the party line. There's a lot of like national propaganda, of course, but at the same time, there's a lot of internal criticism and disagreement, even within the state media, because there's big things about, like I said, the redistribution, environmental things, and not just certain voices, but the party knows that the environmental situation has become pretty bad in a lot of places. It's not as bad as it was in like the 2000s or 90s.
Oh no, it was pretty bad back then.
Yeah, yeah, but it's not very good in a lot of places still. So they recognize that there's issues there, and they are making some attempts to fix it. But again, it's not enough.
Because it's a what's the economic term for that? It's something for like a shared cost or something like that. that you pay with the environment because it's something everybody's going to have to put up with, and nobody
Yeah.
wants to pay for it,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Um, so the state has to intervene and do that. I mean, again,
Mhm.
fixing the environment, it's like it's not profitable, but you're going to die if you don't.
Yeah, it has to be done, or else everything else is gonna go to shit.
It's like that lack of foresight that the market has.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like it pollute everything because it's cheaper,
Well,
more efficient, and then, well, if you destroy everything, then you can't make money at all. Like the
exactly. Yeah.
infinitely lower wages until there's nothing. Why doesn't everybody buy anything?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing, the
Mhm.
same kind of nonsense.
Mhm.
So we do recognize that there are things that China should not be doing. They shouldn't be plundering Africa like that. They could be giving a lot better deals
Oh yeah. Yeah.
to these countries. So yeah.
But,
So I
yeah,
think
but sorry. Go ahead.
okay. No, go ahead.
I'd say in some. This is just. I'm not to like try to go over you or whatever, but like, I'd say sometimes they are like doing the plundering thing. Like I said with the mining companies and the banana thing, where it literally is just blatant exploitation. Because that's one thing, and that's literally imperialism. And then you have that kind of greasy social imperialism, where they are helping them build, and it's similar to the IMF, where they're giving out loans and stuff, but it's not with the political conditions. So it's it's help, but it's not the best kind of help. But yeah, because I like when people talk about it, like I get really upset when people are like, "Oh, China's not imperialist. They don't do like anything." I'm like, "Have you seen?" But at the same time, not everything that they do is harm, but it could be done better. Basically, what you said before. But yeah,
There's a bias towards opportunistic as opposed to altruistic.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we've pretty much covered everything we wanted to say, and it's been an hour, and
Oh,
it's been just some stuff I got to do. So,
okay.
was there any other final point that you wanted to make?
Um, not really. Just that people who are 100% gung ho in favor of China without criticism are blatantly wrong. And Dengism is a ridiculous ideology, and it's basically only a Western thing that people want to emulate the mistakes of uh, those who criticize China without merit are also wrong, but it should also be remembered that criticism is important because it needs to be said, and without it, you're just as bad as people who blatantly support them. So yeah, but just unity, struggle, unity, and yeah, that's about it.
Or in the case of Nepal, struggle separates struggle.
Split, yeah. Uh, anything from you?
No, I think we covered everything. We got all
Okay.
that covered. Okay, well, it was great talking to you.
Thank you very much
I
for
think
having me.
this was a good discussion. We did get some important information out there, and everybody, thank you for watching.